The orange sun of Kepler 442 was setting behind the Crystal Mountains when the first death ships appeared in the sky. Ambassador Thaiska stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station, her forearms trembling as she watched the dark shapes move across the stars. Her moth-like wings, usually a soft blue color, had turned pale with fear. The Vrak Dominion had found them. How many ships? She asked the scanner operator, though she already knew the answer would be terrible. 217 bioships, Ambassador, came the reply. The young Zephyrian's voice shook. They're surrounding the entire system. Thaiska closed her large, compound eyes for a moment. The Vrak were known throughout the galaxy as destroyers. They didn't want to rule other species or steal their resources. They simply wanted to kill everything that wasn't like them. Then they would take the empty planets and cover them with their strange crystal structures. The Zephyrians were a peaceful people. They had never fought wars or built weapons of destruction. Their ships were made for exploring and trading, not fighting. Their colonies across 7 planets in this system housed nearly 12 billion souls, and now death had come for all of them. Send a message to the Galactic Council, Thaiska ordered. Tell them the Vrak have arrived. Request immediate military assistance. The communications officer, an elderly Zephyrian named Hesvo, worked at his console for several minutes before looking up with despair in his eyes. Ambassador, the Vrak are jamming all our long-range communications. I can send short messages within the system, but nothing beyond it. Through the massive viewing window, Thaiska could see the first signs of the attack beginning. Green streaks of light fell from the Vrak ships like deadly rain, where they touched the surface of the nearest planet. Clouds of sickly yellow smoke rose into the atmosphere. She knew what that meant. The bioweapons had begun their work. The Vrak bioweapons were perhaps the most horrible thing in the known galaxy. They didn't just kill living things. They dissolved everything except the crystal structures the Vrak preferred. Flesh, bone, metal, stone, water. Everything would break down into basic elements. Within days, entire planets would become empty rocks ready for Vrak colonization. How long do we have? Thaiska asked, though she didn't want to hear the answer. Based on their previous attacks, Hesvo said quietly, 72 hours. Maybe less. Thaiska felt her heart sinking. 72 hours for 12 billion people to simply disappear from existence. The Galactic Council would never send help in time, even if they could get a message through. Most Council species were afraid of the Vrak and preferred to sacrifice smaller civilizations rather than risk war. There must be something we can do, she whispered. Ambassador, called out another technician. I'm detecting something strange. There are brief gaps in their jamming field. Very short ones, maybe 2 or 3 seconds each. It happens when their command ship moves to a different position. Thaiska turned quickly. Can we send a message during those gaps? Maybe a very short one, but it would have to be simple and fast. How short? 30 seconds at most. And there's no guarantee anyone would receive it. Thaiska looked out at the dying planet below. Yellow clouds now covered half the surface. She could see the lights of cities going dark one by one. Somewhere down there, millions of her people were dying horrible deaths, their bodies dissolving, their screams echoing through empty streets. She had to try something. Prepare an emergency broadcast, she ordered. Maximum power on all frequencies. Send it to every corner of the galaxy. What should the message say? Hesvo asked. Thaiska thought for a moment. 30 seconds to explain that an entire species was about to die. 30 seconds to beg for help from civilizations that might not even care. What could she possibly say that would matter? This is Ambassador Thaiska of the Zephyrian Republic, she began, speaking slowly so Hesvo could record her words. The Vrak Dominion is attacking our system. 12 billion people are going to die. We have no weapons to fight them. We have no way to escape. If anyone can hear this message, please help us. Please don't let our species disappear forever. This is our last call for help. She paused, then added, please remember us. Ready to transmit, Ambassador, Hesvo reported. They waited. Through the window, Thaiska could see more green streaks falling like a deadly meteor shower. The second planet in their system was now completely covered in yellow clouds. Soon the bioweapons would spread to the third planet where her own home city was located. Now, shouted the scanner operator. The jamming field has a gap. Transmit, Thaiska ordered. The powerful transmitters of the diplomatic station sent her message racing across space at faster than light speed. For 30 precious seconds, the words of a dying ambassador reached out into the darkness between the stars. Then the jamming field closed again, and they were alone. Did it work? Theska asked. I don't know, Hesvo replied honestly. The signal was sent, but I can't tell if anyone received it. Hours passed. More planets fell to the Vrak bioweapons. The diplomatic station, located in the outer part of the system, would probably be among the last targets. That gave them time to watch their entire civilization die. Theska remained on the observation deck, refusing food or rest. She owed it to her people to witness their end. Every few hours she would ask for updates on any response to her message. There were none. On the second day, the fourth planet died. On the third day, the fifth planet began to turn yellow. The Vrak ships moved in perfect formation, methodical and patient. They had done this many times before. Ambassador, Hesvo called out during the morning of the third day. I'm picking up something strange. What kind of strange? Theska asked, not daring to hope. Deep space sensors are detecting massive gravitational disturbances at the edge of our system. Something big is coming out of hyperspace. Theska felt her heart skip a beat. The Galactic Council? I don't think so. The signatures are different, much more powerful than anything in the Council fleet databases. How many ships? Hesvo stared at his instruments in confusion. I'm not sure. The readings don't make sense. It looks like hundreds of ships, but they're not configured like anything I've ever seen. Outside, the Vrak command ships had noticed the disturbance too. Their perfect formations began to shift, turning toward whatever was approaching from deep space. Ambassador, the scanner operator called out excitedly. The jamming field is flickering. Whatever's coming is interfering with their systems. Try to contact them, Theska ordered. Find out who they are. For several minutes, Hesvo worked at his console. Then his compound eyes widened in surprise. I'm getting a response, Ambassador. But it's not in any language I recognize. Put it through the universal translator. The speakers crackled with static. Then a voice came through. It was unlike any voice Theska had ever heard. Deep, confident, and strangely comforting despite the serious tone. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call. Hold your position and prepare for immediate assistance. Nobody dies today. Theska stared at the speakers in shock. Terran? She had never heard of such a species. And what did they mean by defense force? What kind of civilization had both the power and the will to respond to a desperate message from strangers? Try to respond, she ordered. Terran ships, this is Ambassador Theska. Thank you for responding, but you don't understand the situation. The Vrak Dominion has over 200 bioships. They destroy entire species. You should retreat while you still can. There was a pause, then the human voice came back. This time, Theska could swear she heard amusement in the tone. Ambassador, we've analyzed the Vrak fleet composition. 217 vessels. Predominantly biological in nature, armed with molecular dissolution weapons. We've seen worse on a Tuesday. The communication ended, leaving Theska staring at the speakers in bewilderment. Who were these Terrans, and what kind of galaxy did they come from, where the Vrak Dominion was just another Tuesday problem? She was about to find out. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the Terran Deep Space Monitoring Station Olympus, watching the holographic display that showed the Kepler 442 system. The desperate message from the Zephyrian ambassador was still playing on repeat, her voice filled with fear and hopelessness. Ma'am, reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from the communication station, we've confirmed the signal's authenticity. The Vrak Dominion has deployed a full extermination fleet against a peaceful species with no military capabilities. Chen studied the tactical display. 217 bioships, each one the size of a small city. The Vrak had positioned themselves to systematically destroy every planet in the system. It was their standard method. Slow, methodical, and absolutely thorough. Time to total species extinction? She asked. 68 hours and counting, Admiral. The bioweapons have already consumed 2 planets completely. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. 12 billion people, an entire civilization that had never hurt anyone, about to disappear forever simply because they existed. She opened her eyes and looked around the command center at her staff. They were all watching her, waiting for orders. Activate Protocol Omega, she said quietly. The command center fell silent. Protocol Omega hadn't been used since the establishment of the Terran Defense Network 15 years ago. It was humanity's most secret military doctrine, known only to the highest levels of command. Ma'am, Rodriguez said carefully, Protocol Omega is for threats to human space. These aliens aren't even in our sector. The protocol states total species defense, Chen replied firmly. It doesn't say which species. Send the activation codes. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez hesitated for just a moment, then began typing rapidly at his console. Sending activation codes to all sleeping giants in sectors 7 through 15. Estimated time to full fleet mobilization, 6 hours. Chen nodded and turned to the tactical officer. Commander Park, I want full battle analysis on Vrak bioships. Everything we know about their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. Yes, ma'am. Should I contact the Galactic Council for additional information? No, Chen said sharply. The Council had the same information we did about this attack. They chose to do nothing. We handle this ourselves. Across human space, the sleeping giants began to wake up. To most of the galaxy, they appeared to be ordinary civilian vessels. Cargo haulers moving goods between systems. Mining ships working asteroid belts. Research stations studying distant stars. But these were no ordinary ships. They were the most sophisticated military vessels ever built, disguised to look harmless and scattered throughout known space. The cargo hauler Prosperity, carrying grain shipments near the Centauri system, received its activation codes first. Captain Maria Santos read the encrypted message twice before believing it. Then she pressed the red button she had hoped never to use. The ship's outer hull began to split apart like a flower blooming. Massive weapon systems extended from hidden compartments. The cargo bays opened to reveal fighter craft and assault shuttles. Within minutes, the harmless-looking freighter had transformed into the heavy cruiser TNS Retribution. All hands, this is the captain, Santos announced over the ship's intercom. We have received a Protocol Omega activation. A species is facing extinction, and we are their only hope. Battle stations, people, we're going to war. Similar transformations were happening throughout human space. The mining ship Deep Digger became the battleship TNS Inevitable. The research station Galileo revealed itself as the carrier TNS Prometheus. One by one, humanity's hidden fleet emerged from its peaceful disguise. On the command ship Olympus, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as friendly icons appeared across multiple star systems. Each one represented a vessel that had been waiting years for this moment. Fleet status report, she requested. 847 vessels responding to activation. Codes, reported Commander Park. Estimated arrival time at Kepler 442, 14 hours. Crew status. All ships report full manning levels. Total personnel, approximately 2,400,000. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The Terran Defense Force had been preparing for this day since humanity first learned about the Vrak Dominion. While other species fled or hid when the bioships appeared, humans had been quietly building the largest military fleet in galactic history. Admiral, called out the communications officer, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. The holographic display changed to show General Harrison, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His weathered face was grim but determined. Admiral Chen, he said, I've been briefed on the situation. You have full authorization for any action necessary to preserve the Zephyrian species. The President has signed Emergency Order 7749, granting you complete operational freedom. Understood, General. What about political complications? There won't be any. If the Galactic Council complains about human military action, we'll remind them that they had the same opportunity to help and chose not to. As far as we're concerned, they forfeited any right to object. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. In 14 hours, the largest human fleet ever assembled would arrive at a system they had never visited, to fight for a species they had never met, against an enemy that terrified half the galaxy. She thought about the message from Ambassador Thiska, the desperate plea in her voice, the simple request to be remembered if they couldn't be saved. It reminded her of something from Earth's history, from the old days when humanity itself had faced extinction. Ma'am? Rodriguez interrupted her thoughts. We're receiving status updates from all fleet commanders. They're requesting battle plans. Chen turned to the tactical display studying the Vrak fleet positions. The bioships were arranged in their standard formation, a sphere surrounding the entire system, with command vessels at strategic points. It was designed to prevent any escape and ensure complete destruction of all life. Tell all commanders to proceed to Kepler 442 at maximum speed, she ordered. Battle plans will be transmitted when they arrive. For now, they should know only one thing. We're not there to negotiate or posture or make political statements. We're there to save every single Zephyrian life, no matter what it costs. As the human fleet raced through hyperspace toward the dying system, Admiral Chen composed her own message to the Zephyrian ambassador. She kept it simple and direct. Ambassador Thiska, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We are en route to your system with substantial military assets. Hold your positions and keep your people in secure locations. Help is coming. She paused, then added something that wasn't in any military protocol. Your species will not go extinct today. That's a promise. The message was transmitted toward Kepler 442 at faster-than-light speeds. In a few hours, the survivors would know that someone had heard their cry for help. Someone was coming for them. Chen walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 12 billion people were waiting to die. They had no weapons to defend themselves, no way to escape, and no reason to hope that anyone cared about their survival. They were wrong about that last part. Humanity had learned something during its long climb from the caves to the stars. The universe was vast and cold and often cruel. Species appeared and disappeared like sparks in the darkness, but sometimes, if they were very lucky, they found others who refused to let the light go out. The Zephyrians were about to learn that they weren't alone after all. Behind Admiral Chen, the command center buzzed with activity, as hundreds of officers coordinated the largest military operation in human history. Ship movements, supply lines, battle formations, contingency plans, all focused on a single goal that would have seemed impossible to most civilizations. They were going to save everyone. Admiral, Commander Park reported, long-range sensors are detecting the first elements of our fleet dropping out of hyperspace at Kepler 442. The Vrak have noticed them. Chen nodded. Open a channel to all fleet commanders. It's time to introduce ourselves. The greatest military force humanity had ever assembled was about to announce its arrival to the galaxy, and the Vrak Dominion was about to learn why species went extinct on Earth's schedule, not theirs. The first human ship appeared at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, like a ghost materializing from the void. The TNS Wraith, a stealth destroyer that had been disguised as a deep space research vessel, dropped out of hyperspace with barely a whisper of gravitational disturbance. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display as it populated with enemy contacts. 217 Vrak bioships exactly as reported. Each one was a living creature the size of a city, bred for warfare and conquest. Their dark hulls pulsed with organic lights, and streams of bioweapons continued to rain down on the dying planets below. Preliminary scan complete, Captain, reported her tactical officer. The Vrak are maintaining standard extermination formation. Command vessels positioned at strategic points around the system perimeter. Vasquez nodded. The Vrak were predictable in their methods. They had been using the same tactics for thousands of years, systematically destroying species after species with mechanical precision. They had never needed to adapt because nothing had ever challenged them effectively. That was about to change. Communications. Signal the fleet, Vasquez ordered. Begin emergence sequence. Full tactical deployment. Space around the Kepler 442 system began to ripple with hyperspace distortions. One by one, human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took their positions. But these weren't the same vessels that had begun the journey. The disguised cargo haulers, mining ships, and research stations had transformed during transit into fully armed warships. The TNS Inevitable emerged from hyperspace with a gravitational signature that registered as a small moon. Captain Marcus Reeves stood in the ship's command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing every aspect of the battlefield. His crew of 50,000 was ready for war. Fleet status report, Reeves requested. 847 vessels in position, Captain, his executive officer replied. Total firepower equivalent to the combined fleets of 15 council species. And crew morale? The executive officer smiled grimly. The crew is angry, sir. They've seen the footage from the dying planets. They want to make the Vrak pay for every life lost. Reeves understood that anger. Humans had a peculiar reaction to genocide. While most species responded with fear or calculated self-preservation, humans became furious. It was a trait left over from their evolution on Earth, where the survival of the tribe meant fighting anything that threatened the group. The Vrak had just threatened 12 billion innocents. That made them humanity's enemy. On the carrier TNS Prometheus, Commander Lisa Park was overseeing the launch of fighter squadrons. Unlike the sleek, elegant craft used by most galactic militaries, human fighters looked brutal and efficient. They were designed by engineers who had learned to fly in Earth's violent weather, systems and asteroid fields. All squadrons report. "Ready for launch," her flight controller announced. "Tell them the rules of engagement," Park ordered. "This is not a peacekeeping mission or a diplomatic action. This is species preservation. The Vrak have chosen extinction as their method of expansion. We're here to show them how extinction really works." Across the system, the Vrak Dominion was beginning to react to the sudden appearance of the human fleet. Bioships began to shift from their extermination positions, turning their massive forms toward the new threat. But they moved slowly with the confidence of predators who had never faced serious opposition. Queen Admiral Sketh, commander of the Vrak fleet, observed the human ships from the bridge of her command vessel. The bioship was a living creature that responded to her thoughts. Its neural pathways merged with her own consciousness. Through its senses, she could feel the electromagnetic signatures of the approaching vessels. "Analysis," she commanded, her voice echoing through the organic chambers of the bridge. Her tactical subordinate, a smaller Vrak whose carapace bore the scars of many battles, consulted the ship's biological sensors. "Unknown species, Queen Admiral. 847 vessels of unfamiliar design. They appear to be metallic constructs rather than living ships." Sketh felt amusement ripple through her thoughts. Mechanical ships were primitive, weak things used by species too inferior to grow their own vessels. The idea that such crude technology could threaten the Dominion was almost insulting. "Signal their lead vessel," she ordered. "Inform them that they have entered a Dominion extermination zone. They will withdraw immediately or be added to the cleansing schedule." The message was transmitted across all frequencies in the standard Vrak ultimatum format. Species that received such warnings typically fled the system within hours. Those few that didn't were quickly destroyed by bioweapons that dissolved their ships as easily as they dissolved planets. The response from the human fleet came quickly, broadcast on all channels with enough power to reach every vessel in the system. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You have attacked a species under our protection. You have exactly 30 seconds to withdraw from this system, or we will demonstrate why nothing goes extinct on our watch. This is your only warning." Sketh's amusement deepened. Protection? The concept was alien to Vrak thinking. Species either dominated or were dominated. There was no middle ground, no cooperation between different forms of life. The idea that one species would fight to protect another was not just foolish, it was incomprehensible. 30 seconds, she mused. How generous of them. She waited exactly 31 seconds before responding. "Unknown vessels," her message began. "You have interfered with a lawful Dominion operation. Your species designation will be added to our records for future cleansing. Withdraw now, or face immediate dissolution." The human response came not in words but in action. The first Vrak bioship died before Sketh even realized the battle had begun. The TNS Wraith had crept close enough to attach quantum mines directly to the creature's hull. The explosion didn't just destroy the ship. It vaporized it so completely that nearby bioships were showered with molecular debris. Then the human fleet opened fire with everything they had. The weapons were unlike anything the Vrak had encountered before. Instead of the energy beams or projectile systems used by most species, the humans employed adaptive technology that analyzed each target and modified itself accordingly. Plasma streams that adjusted their frequency to penetrate bioship armor. Kinetic projectiles that changed their molecular structure mid-flight. Electronic warfare systems that confused the neural networks connecting Vrak crews to their ships. Impossible, Sketh breathed as her tactical displays showed bioship after bioship going dark. "Queen Admiral," her subordinate reported with panic creeping into his voice. "They're using multiple unknown weapon types simultaneously. Our ships can't adapt fast enough." Sketh watched as a squadron of human fighters swarmed one of her command vessels. But they weren't engaging in the neat, orderly combat patterns used by civilized species. They attacked like a pack of Earth's ancient wolves, coordinating their strikes to overwhelm the bioship's defenses while providing cover for each other. The bioship fought back with streams of acid that could dissolve any known metal. The corrosive jet struck the human fighters directly, But instead of dissolving, the small craft simply adjusted their hull composition and continued attacking. Within minutes, the massive bioship was crippled and drifting helplessly in space. "How are they doing this?" Sketh demanded, unknown Queen Admiral. "Their technology appears to be completely adaptive. Whatever we use against them, they counter within seconds." Sketh realized with growing horror that she was witnessing something that shouldn't exist. A species that fought like the Vrak themselves, ruthless, efficient, and utterly without mercy, but with technology that surpassed even the Dominion's bioweapons. The human fleet didn't fight like the prey species the Vrak were accustomed to destroying. They didn't panic or break formation or try to escape. They attacked with the cold precision of apex predators who had never doubted their ability to win. "Signal the fleet," Sketh ordered. "Emergency combat formation. Deploy all bioweapons. We will show these primitives why the Dominion has never been defeated." But even as she gave the orders, more bioships were falling to the human assault. The mechanical vessels moved in patterns that made no tactical sense according to Dominion military doctrine. Yet somehow they were devastatingly effective. On the TNS Inevitable, Captain Reeves watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. "Status report. 17 Vrak vessels destroyed, 34 disabled," his tactical officer reported. "No human casualties. The enemy is attempting to regroup, but they're not adapting to our tactics." "That's because they've never faced a species from a death world," Reeves replied. "They're used to fighting prey. We're predators." The battle was only 15 minutes old, and already the Vrak were learning a terrible truth about the galaxy. There were worse things than extinction in the darkness between the stars. There were humans. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and Queen Admiral Sketh was beginning to understand that she faced something completely outside her experience. Half of her bioships were either destroyed or drifting helplessly in space, their neural networks scrambled by human electronic warfare systems. "Status report," she demanded, though she already knew the answer would be terrible. 93 vessels destroyed, 41 disabled, her subordinate reported. "The humans have lost none." Sketh felt something she had never experienced before in her long military career: doubt. The Vrak Dominion had conquered hundreds of species across thousands of years. Their bioships were living weapons evolved for perfect warfare. Yet these mechanical constructs from an unknown species were dismantling her fleet with casual efficiency. "How is this possible?" she whispered. Her question was answered by the appearance of human boarding pods on her tactical display. Unlike the sleek vessels used by most species, these were crude-looking cylinders that moved with startling speed and maneuverability. They weren't trying to dock with her command ship in any civilized manner. They were drilling through the hull. "Security teams to breach points," Sketh ordered. "Repel all boarders." But even as she gave the command, she knew it was probably useless. If these humans could destroy her bioship so easily, what chance did her soldiers have in direct combat? On the human assault ship TNS Reaper, Colonel James Wright was leading the first boarding action against a Vrak bioship. His team of 50 Marines had trained for this moment using every piece of intelligence humanity had gathered about Vrak biology and tactics. "Remember," Wright told his soldiers as their boarding pod burned through the alien hull, "these things are used to fighting prey species. They've probably never faced opposition that shoots back effectively. Use that against them." The pod breached into a pulsing organic corridor that looked more like the inside of a giant creature than a spaceship, which Wright realized was exactly what it was. The walls were covered in a mucus-like substance that probably served some biological function. The air was thick and humid with a smell like rotting vegetation. "Contacts ahead," reported Sergeant Martinez, her rifle aimed at the dark passage ahead. The first Vrak soldiers appeared around a bend in the corridor. They were insectoid creatures nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous armor covering their bodies and multiple arms ending in razor-sharp claws. They moved with the fluid grace of natural predators. They also died very quickly. Human weapons had been designed for warfare on Earth, where survival meant being able to kill anything that threatened the tribe. The plasma rifles carried by Wright's Marines could punch through tank armor. Against organic targets, even heavily armored ones, they were devastatingly effective. The Vrak soldiers collapsed in smoking heaps before they could close to melee range. More appeared from side passages trying to surround the human boarding party. They found themselves facing soldiers who had trained in environments far more hostile than the interior of a bioship. "Advance to the neural center," Wright ordered. Demolition team, prepare the virus packages. The human plan was elegantly simple. Instead of trying to destroy every bioship individually, they would inject adaptive computer viruses directly into the creature's nervous systems. The viruses would rewrite the biological code that controlled the ships, turning them against each other. It was a tactic that could only have been developed by a species that understood both technology and biology well enough to merge them into weapons of war. On the bridge of his flagship, Captain Reeves watched the boarding actions with professional interest. 37 human teams had successfully penetrated Vrak bioships and were working to install the viral weapons. The process was going faster than expected. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Vrak command ship. Queen Admiral Sketh is requesting a parley." Reeves considered this. In normal military doctrine, accepting a parley during battle was often wise. It gave both sides a chance to avoid unnecessary casualties and perhaps reach a diplomatic solution. But this wasn't a normal military situation. This was species preservation. The Vrak had come here to commit genocide, and they had already murdered billions of Zephyrians. Diplomatic niceties seemed somewhat beside the point. Put her through, he decided. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Vrak command ship. Queen Admiral Sketh stood in what appeared to be a chamber made of living tissue, her carapace gleaming in the organic light. She was an impressive figure, clearly evolved for dominance and warfare. "Human commander," she began, "I propose we discuss terms for ending this conflict. Your species has proven unexpectedly capable. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation." Reeves studied her for a moment before responding. "What kind of accommodation did you have in mind?" "The Dominion could add your species to our protected list," Sketh said. "We would not target human space for cleansing operations. In return, you would withdraw from this system and allow us to complete our work here. Your work being the extermination of 12 billion innocent people. The cleansing of inferior species is necessary for galactic order," Sketh replied matter-of-factly. "Surely a species as advanced as yours understands this principle." Reeves felt a familiar anger building in his chest. It was the same rage he had felt when he first heard Ambassador Thiska's desperate message. The cold, casual way the Vrak spoke about genocide reminded him of the worst chapters in human history. "No," he said quietly. "We don't understand that principle at all." "Then you are fools," Sketh snapped. "The weak must give way to the strong. It is the natural order." "Natural order," Reeves repeated. "Queen Admiral, let me explain something about natural order. On our homeworld there were creatures called wolves. Pack hunters. When something threatened their young, they didn't negotiate or compromise. They killed it. Every member of the pack working together until the threat was eliminated." He paused, letting that sink in. "You just threatened our young, Queen Admiral. All 12 billion of them that you've decided to murder. And now you're about to learn what happens when you make that kind of threat to a pack species." Sketh's compound eyes narrowed. "You dare compare your mechanical constructs to the bioships of the Dominion? We have conquered hundreds of species. We are evolution's greatest triumph." "Evolution's greatest triumph," Reeves said with a slight smile, "is a bipedal ape that learned to use tools and fire. Everything else is just details." He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Signal all teams. Execute viral deployment. It's time to show the Dominion what happens when predators meet apex predators." Throughout the Vrak fleet, human marines reached the neural centers of bioships and began injecting their viral packages. The computer viruses, designed by Earth's most brilliant programmers, began rewriting the biological code that controlled the living vessels. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Bioships that had fought together for centuries suddenly turned their weapons on each other. Their neural networks, corrupted by human-designed programs, identified other Vrak vessels as threats to be eliminated. Queen Admiral Sketh watched in horror as her own ships began destroying themselves. The perfect biological harmony that had made the Vrak Dominion invincible was shattered by alien software that treated living creatures like mechanical systems to be reprogrammed. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Living ships cannot be controlled by mechanical viruses." But the evidence was right in front of her. Her bioships were turning into mechanical tools, following programmed instructions instead of their biological instincts. The humans had somehow found a way to treat life itself as just another form of technology. "Queen Admiral, her subordinate reported in a panicked voice. 51 ships are now under human control. They're firing on our remaining vessels. Sketh realized that she was witnessing the end of everything the Vrak Dominion represented. For thousands of years, they had been the ultimate predators of the galaxy. Now they faced a species that treated their greatest weapons as toys to be reprogrammed and turned against them. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "General retreat. All vessels that can still respond to commands withdraw immediately." "What about the cleansing operation?" Sketh looked at the tactical display, where human-controlled bioships were systematically hunting down the survivors of her fleet. The Zephyrian system was no longer under Dominion control. It belonged to the humans now. "The operation is terminated," she said bitterly. "We are no longer the apex predators in this galaxy." The retreat of the Vrak Dominion fleet was swift but costly. Of the 217 bioships that had arrived to exterminate the Zephyrians, only 34 made it out of the system. The rest were either destroyed or had become part of the human fleet, their biological crews replaced by marine boarding parties. Captain Reeves watched the last Vrak vessels disappear into hyperspace, then opened a channel to the Zephyrian diplomatic station. "Ambassador Thaiska," he said, "this is Captain Reeves of the Terran Defense Force. The Vrak have been driven from your system. Your people are safe." The response came immediately, filled with wonder and gratitude. "Captain Reeves, how can we ever thank you? You saved our entire species." 3 days after the battle, Ambassador Thiska stood in the cargo bay of the TNS Inevitable, surrounded by the strangest sight she had ever witnessed. Human Marines were working alongside Vrak bioships, not as conquerors but as engineers, carefully studying the living vessels and learning how to maintain them. "It's remarkable," Admiral Chen said, standing beside the ambassador. "Your people survived one of the most thorough extermination attempts in galactic history. Every single Zephyrian colony is intact." Thiska watched as a human technician gently inserted a sensor probe into the wall of a captured bioship. The living vessel responded with what looked almost like curiosity, its organic surfaces shifting to accommodate the foreign device. "I still don't understand how you did it," she admitted. "The Vrak Dominion was supposed to be unstoppable. They've destroyed hundreds of species over thousands of years." "They were unstoppable," Admiral Chen replied, "against prey species. But we're not prey." The Admiral walked over to a holographic display that showed the current status of the Kepler 442 system. Instead of the yellow clouds of bioweapons that had been consuming the planets, green indicators showed recovery operations in progress on every world. The Vrak bioweapons were designed to dissolve everything except their preferred crystal structures, Chen explained. But they were also biological. Once we understood their genetic code, we could design counteragents. "Your planets will be fully restored within 6 months." Thaiska felt tears forming in her compound eyes. 6 months ago, her species had been facing extinction. Now they were looking at complete planetary restoration using the same biological weapons that had almost destroyed them. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why did you help us? Your species had never met ours before. We had nothing to offer you in return. Why risk war with the Vrak Dominion for strangers?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Finally, she spoke. "On our homeworld, there's a saying, 'Never again.' It comes from a dark period in our history when some humans tried to exterminate other humans. When we learned about it, we made a promise. Never again would we allow genocide to happen if we had the power to stop it." She turned to look directly at Thiska. "It doesn't matter if the victims are human or alien. Genocide is genocide, and we will not tolerate it in our galaxy." The implications of those words were staggering. Thaiska realized she was speaking to representatives of a species that had declared itself the guardian of all life in the galaxy, not for profit or political gain, but simply because they refused to let anyone face extinction alone. "Admiral," called out Captain Reeves from across the cargo bay, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command." The holographic display changed to show General Harrison, his expression more serious than usual. "Admiral Chen," he began, "the galactic community is reacting to news of the Kepler 442 incident. We're getting communications from 17 species requesting similar protection agreements. The Altarian Republic wants to discuss a mutual defense treaty. The Procyon Federation is asking for military advisors." Chen nodded. "What about the Galactic Council?" "Mixed reactions. The Hegemony Council is calling for an emergency session to discuss unauthorized military intervention in sovereign space. The Peaceful Alliance is praising our actions, but worried about the precedent. The Trade Federation is already calculating profit margins on defense contracts. And the Vrak Dominion? General Harrison's expression became grim. Complete radio silence from their space. But our deep space monitors are detecting massive fleet movements throughout their territory. They're mobilizing everything they have. Thaiska felt a chill run through her wings. They're coming back, aren't they? With everything they have? Probably, Admiral Chen said calmly. The Vrak don't handle defeat well. They'll want to make an example of both our species. But you're not worried. Admiral Chen smiled. And there was something in that expression that reminded Thaiska why humans had earned a reputation as Deathworlders. Ambassador, let me tell you about human military doctrine. When someone threatens our friends, we don't just defend them. We make sure the threat never threatens anyone again. She turned to Captain Reeves. Signal the fleet. Begin Phase 2 operations. Phase 2? Thaiska asked. The Sentinel Network, Chen explained. We're not just going to wait for the next species to send a distress call. We're going to position human forces throughout the galaxy, ready to respond to any extinction threat within 72 hours. On the holographic display, new icons began appearing across a map of the galaxy. Human ships, still disguised as civilian vessels, were taking positions in every major system. Some would appear to be trading posts or research stations. Others would masquerade as mining operations or exploration vessels. But all of them would be ready to transform into warships at a moment's notice. How many ships? Thaiska asked, awed by the scope of the operation. 2,000 vessels, Admiral Chen replied, crewed by volunteers who've signed up for indefinite deployment. They'll live normal civilian lives most of the time, but when someone calls for help, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Thaiska understood. Humanity was establishing a permanent military presence throughout the galaxy, hidden in plain sight, ready to respond to genocide wherever it appeared. The other species won't like this, Thaiska observed. They'll see it as human expansion, human militarism. They can see it however they want, Chen said firmly. But they'll also see that extinction-level threats are no longer viable. The cost of attempting genocide just became higher than any species can afford to pay. Over the following weeks, the news of humanity's intervention in the Kepler 442 system spread throughout the galaxy. The story grew in the telling, as stories do. Some versions claimed the humans had destroyed the entire Vrak fleet without losing a single ship. Others said they had turned the bioships against each other using impossible technology. All versions agreed on one thing. There was a new power in the galaxy, and it had very firm opinions about genocide. On the Hegemony Council station, representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the implications. The Craxian delegate, representing a species known for its aggressive expansion policies, was the first to speak. The humans have violated every principle of galactic sovereignty, he declared. They intervened in a conflict between two species without authorization, without even consulting the Council. This cannot be allowed to stand. The Altarian representative, whose people had already signed a protection agreement with humanity, responded calmly. The humans intervened to prevent genocide. The Council had the same information and chose to do nothing. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why we needed aliens to remind us of basic morality. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The galaxy now contained a species that treated the protection of life as a military priority. Some species would see this as tyranny. Others would see it as salvation. But all would have to live with the consequences. In the depths of Vrak space, Queen Admiral Sisketh stood before the Dominion War Council, delivering her report on the failed Zephyrian extermination. The assembled queens listened in silence as she described the human weapons, their tactics, their complete victory. "Recommendation?" asked the Prime Queen, her voice carrying the authority of millions of years of evolutionary dominance. "Avoid human space completely," Sketh replied. "Mark their territory as forbidden. These creatures are not prey. They are apex predators from a death world, and they have made the protection of prey species their primary military objective. You suggest the Dominion withdraw from expansion operations? I suggest the Dominion consider that expansion is no longer viable. The humans have demonstrated the ability to turn our own bioships against us. They have weapons we cannot counter and tactics we cannot predict. Most importantly, they have something we lack, which is They fight for others instead of just themselves. That makes them more dangerous than any biological weapon. The War Council discussed the matter for days before reaching their decision. For the first time in Dominion history, they would halt expansion operations and withdraw their fleets to defensive positions. The age of easy conquest was over. Back in the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the TNS Inevitable, watching as Zephyrian ships began emerging from their hiding places. The recovery was proceeding ahead of schedule. Within a few months, the system would be fully restored. "Admiral," reported Captain Reeves, "we're receiving another distress call. The Epsilon Eridani system. The Ravager fleet is attacking a colony of artists and philosophers. Estimated population 4 billion. Chen nodded and turned toward the bridge. "Signal the Sentinel network." Nearest response team to Epsilon Eridani, full speed. "Time to extinction? 48 hours, Admiral. Then we have time to save them all." As the human fleet prepared for its next rescue mission, Admiral Chen composed her daily report to Earth Command. It was a simple message, but one that would echo throughout galactic history. SOS call received. Species protection initiated. Mission status ongoing. The galaxy is a safer place today than it was yesterday. We'll continue to monitor for extinction threats and respond accordingly. She paused, then added a personal note.